My name is Audrey, and today marks my 30th birthday. I want to share with you how I ended up becoming a millionaire, thanks to two extremely greedy individuals. They say that what goes around comes around. I first met my husband, Gavin, during a company retreat. We each managed different departments, and our paths had never crossed before. The event was full of activities, including games and sports. During a volleyball match, I twisted my ankle, and Gavin rushed to help, carrying me to get first aid. I was impressed by his kindness and wanted to get to know him more. After the retreat, I reached out to him, asking if he'd like to grab coffee sometime. He agreed, and we met at a local cafe. We spent the time chatting about the retreat, our hobbies, and family life. I was surprised by how many interests we shared. We liked the same sports, TV shows, and other activities. Gavin opened up about his relationship with his family, particularly his close connection with his mother, Meg. He said, "I'm really close with my mom. We make sure to see each other at least twice a week." "That's nice," I said. "What about your dad?" Gavin's mood shifted slightly. "He left a few years ago, and we don't really talk anymore." "I'm sorry to hear that. Is everything okay between you two?" "It's complicated, Audrey. Things didn't work out." "What do you mean by didn't work out?" "He's your father, not your ex." Gavin sighed. "Let's talk about something else." "Sure. I didn't mean to pry," I said. "I just wanted to understand you better." We changed the subject, and I respected that it was a sensitive issue for him. As we continued to grow closer, I thought he might eventually open up more about his past. Over the next few months, our relationship became more serious. We had lunch together every day and spent lots of time together outside of work. When Gavin's birthday approached, I decided to surprise him with a party. I coordinated with our friends to organize it, including making the guest list. Since Gavin was so close to his mom, Meg, I thought it would be nice to invite her. I wasn't sure about inviting his dad, given their complicated relationship, so I chose not to. On the day of the party, everything was set up, and guests began to arrive. Just before Gavin's expected arrival, I noticed a woman in an elegant green evening gown walking toward the door, carrying a designer handbag. I approached her to introduce myself. "Hi, I'm Audrey. You must be one of Gavin's relatives. It's great to meet you. How do you know him?" Finally, someone with manners. "I'm Meg, Gavin's mother. And yes, I'm the most important guest here. He's my son, after all." "Of course, Meg. I didn't mean any disrespect. Gavin speaks very highly of you. Please, come in and make yourself at home." "Well, I should hope so. I raised him practically on my own. I hope you've planned a decent party, though. I've put a lot of effort in, and our friends have helped, too. I hope you enjoy it." "We'll see," Meg replied. "Just make sure you don't get in the way of my time with Gavin. He's my son." "Of course, Meg. I respect your relationship with him, and I wouldn't want to interfere." Despite my efforts to stay calm and accommodate her, Meg wasn't impressed. She began loudly criticizing the decorations and even insulting some of the other guests. I kept my composure, hoping she would warm to me over time. When Gavin's car pulled up, I went outside to greet him. The party went smoothly, and Gavin was genuinely pleased with the surprise. We enjoyed cake and exchanged gifts. Throughout the evening, Meg insisted on being in every photo with Gavin, even the ones with just the two of us. She proudly declared that her gift was the best, sure that Gavin would love it. To my surprise, Gavin didn't stop her behavior. Instead, he made sure she was always by his side. During dinner, Gavin stood up to thank everyone for coming and announced that he had something important to say. Then, he knelt and pulled out a ring, asking me to marry him. I was overwhelmed with joy and said yes, as everyone cheered and congratulated us. However, I noticed that Meg had quietly slipped away from the table. Confused, I asked Gavin about it. "Gavin, your mom left. Is everything okay? We should check on her and get her blessing. She'll be upset if we don't." "Why do we need her blessing? This is our decision." I always talked with my mom about important things like this. We're really close, and I value her opinion. "I get that she's important to you, but don't we need to make decisions together?" I gently asked. "I understand, but I can't just ignore her. She's a big part of my life. Let's go find her and get her blessing." I was worried about how dependent Gavin seemed on his mother's approval, but I loved him and wanted to make her feel included. We searched the house for her and eventually found her sitting alone in the backyard. Gavin asked for her blessing, which she reluctantly gave. Gavin said, "Mom, I'm sorry I didn't speak to you before proposing. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision, and I thought it was the right time." Meg responded, "You've always come to me for advice on big decisions. I felt left out this time." "I know, and I didn't mean to upset you. I planned to talk to you the next day, but the surprise party got in the way," Gavin explained. "I understand it was unexpected, but you should have spoken to me beforehand," Meg insisted. "You're right, Mom. I got carried away. Audrey has been so supportive, and I wanted to show her how much she means to me." "I can see how much you care for her, Gavin. Just remember to keep me informed about big decisions." "I promise, Mom. I'll do better at keeping you in the loop. You're an important part of my life, and I want you to be a part of ours. That's all I ask." I felt uncomfortable overhearing their conversation and decided to step away, but just as I was leaving, I overheard Meg criticizing me, saying I wasn't good enough for Gavin and that I was only interested in his money. She also said I wasn't even pretty enough for him. Despite her harsh words, I chose to ignore them and moved on. In the weeks that followed, Gavin and I started planning our wedding. Meg didn't offer to help with the preparations, but she insisted on making decisions, particularly about my wedding dress. When I tried to choose my own dress, she threw a tantrum. She also met with me several times, insisting that I should pay more than half of the wedding expenses, claiming I was lucky to marry Gavin and should contribute more. I tried not to let these events affect me too much, holding on to the hope that Meg would eventually warm up to me after the wedding. Finally, on my big day, I found myself in the dressing room with my bridesmaids and mother, slipping into my gorgeous white gown. The compliments were non-stop, everyone admiring how radiant I looked. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door, and to my surprise, Meg walked in, wearing a white wedding dress. "Why are you wearing a wedding dress?" I asked, a bit taken aback. "This is my son's wedding day, and it means everything to me," she replied. "I decided to wear this to highlight my role as the mother of the groom. I understand it's a special day for you, but traditionally, the bride wears white. It might overshadow Audrey," I gently explained. "That's not my concern," Meg shot back. "Gavin is my only son, and I deserve some attention today too." "I get that, Meg, but today is really about celebrating Audrey and Gavin's love and commitment. It's their moment," I calmly pointed out. "I know, but I'm making a statement. My presence here is just as important as anyone else's," she said firmly. Though frustration bubbled up inside me, I didn't want to cause a scene and ruin the day. The ceremony continued, and we exchanged vows and rings, the moment full of emotion as it marked the beginning of our life together. When we were planning the wedding, I asked Gavin to take care of the guest list. I noticed his father wasn't invited, so I decided to ask him about it. "Gav, are you sure you don't want to invite your dad?" I inquired gently. "He left us. He doesn't deserve to be part of something this significant," Gavin replied without hesitation. I considered trying to change his mind but ultimately chose not to press the issue, not wanting to upset him on our special day. The months that followed our wedding were filled with joy. Gavin and I cherished every moment and began making plans to buy our first house together. It was a dream we'd shared for years, and getting married was the first step toward that goal. We spent hours searching for the perfect place. One day, while I was at work, Gavin called. "Hey babe, I'm really sorry, but something urgent came up, and I won't be able to go house hunting with you today," he said. "No problem, love, don't worry about it. I can manage on my own," I reassured him. "Thanks for understanding. I'll make it up to you," Gavin promised. "You better focus on your meeting, and we'll catch up later. Love you," I said with a smile. "Love you too," he replied warmly. After work, I drove to the property. It was a unit on the 10th floor of a building still under construction. When I arrived, the realtor greeted me and mentioned that someone else had arrived under our name to see the place. I was confused since Gavin was busy, but to my surprise, it was Meg, standing at the door with an impatient look on her face. "Why are you here?" I asked, surprised. I wanted to make sure it's a good fit for my son and that there's a place for me to stay when I visit, she answered bluntly. Though I wasn't thrilled about Meg being involved, I didn't want to cause a scene, so I let her join me for the tour. She wasted no time in criticizing the condition of the property, dismissing it as beneath her. By the time the tour ended, I was exhausted and eager to leave. The realtor excused himself to take a call and warned us about the construction hazards. As I wandered around, I noticed an unfinished staircase outside. Without realizing it, Meg approached from behind and kicked my leg, causing me to lose my balance and tumble down the stairs. I lay there, unable to move, with pain shooting through my arms and head. When I looked up, I saw Meg grinning as if she had won something before she swiftly turned and left. Stunned and unable to move for a few minutes, I eventually managed to grab my phone and call for an ambulance. When it arrived, I couldn't stop thinking about how Meg had pushed me. I had always been kind to her, and the thought that she would intentionally hurt me filled me with anger and sorrow. At the hospital, they treated my injuries, and I had some scans done. I tried calling Gavin repeatedly, but he didn't answer. Eventually, the pain medication kicked in, and I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I tried again, and this time, Gavin answered. "Are you serious, Audrey?" he snapped. "Are you really telling me my mom pushed you down the stairs?" "I'm not lying. She kicked me, and I fell because of her," I replied, trying to stay calm. "You're just making up excuses. My mom would never hurt you," Gavin argued. "She's accusing you of being aggressive. I can't believe you're taking her side over mine. She pushed me down those stairs, and now she's lying about it. Please, stop defending her," I pleaded. "I can't come to the hospital. Meg's in shock, and I need to be there for her," Gavin said firmly. "After everything, you're choosing her over me? Maybe you deserve this for what you did," Gavin said coldly, before ending the call. Devastated, I started crying. I spent the next 2 days in shock and grief. As my body healed, I started to gather my strength. My parents came to visit and were horrified by what had happened, as well as Gavin's reaction. My father suggested we look into Gavin's father to uncover the truth, suspecting that Gavin and Meg were hiding something. Following his advice, I hired a private investigator to track down Gavin's father, Neil. When I finally reached him, he seemed confused at first but then understood the situation. "You know, I divorced Megan because she and Gavin were using me for my money," Neil revealed. "I'm the chairman of a big company, and Gavin tried to steal from me. I had no idea." "That's awful," I said, shocked. "I can't believe they would go so far," I said, still in disbelief. "Yeah, it was a tough choice, but I couldn't let them take advantage of me any longer. You should know, those two never have good intentions," Neil warned. "Thank you for telling me, Neil. I trust you, and I appreciate you looking out for me," I said gratefully. "I have a plan to deal with this. I need you to get Gavin and Meg to come to the hospital tomorrow morning." "Why do you want them here?" I asked, my anger rising. "I need to confront them about everything they've done and protect you from any more harm. It's time they face the consequences of their greed," Neil replied, his tone resolute. "I'll try to get them here, but please be careful. I don't want you to get hurt," I warned. "I can handle it, Audrey. Just focus on getting better," Neil reassured me. I was hesitant, and honestly, scared. I didn't want to face either Meg or Gavin, because I couldn't stand seeing a man who had chosen his mother over me, never even bothering to check on me at the hospital, and Meg, because I feared she might try to hurt me again. But I knew that if I wanted to expose their lies, I had to trust Neil. I called Gavin and told him I had a special gift for both him and Meg, something to make up for the tension that had happened. I hinted at its importance and told him I wanted them to come to the hospital to pick it up. Eager for whatever it was, they both agreed to come the next morning. The following morning, Neil arrived at the hospital with a bouquet of flowers. I greeted him and thanked him for his support. Just as we were finishing our conversation, Gavin and Meg walked in, and both froze when they saw Neil sitting calmly in a chair. "Neil, what's going on? Why are you here?" Gavin asked, his voice rising. "I couldn't just stand by and watch you two manipulate Audrey anymore," Neil said calmly. "Manipulate? We haven't done anything wrong. She's the one causing all this trouble," Meg shot back defensively. "That's not true. Audrey's been through a lot because of both of you, and it's time it ended. Neil responded firmly. Dad, you're ruining everything. Audrey and I are in love, Gavin exclaimed. I divorced your mother because of what you two were doing. You tried to take advantage of me and my business. I was just trying to protect my future, Neil explained. Dad, you never supported me. You know I would never have given you anything. Yet you tried to take control of my company behind my back, Gavin argued. I don't want Audrey to go through the same thing I did. I have something here to make sure she doesn't, Neil said, handing Gavin a stack of papers. What's this? Gavin asked, eyeing the papers suspiciously. Divorce papers, Neil answered. So Audrey can finally be free of both of you and your toxic influence. Meg and Gavin were shocked. They started shouting at Neil, begging him to change his mind. But Neil stood his ground, explaining that they had brought this upon themselves. Then, without hesitation, he called security to have them escorted out of the room. After all that had happened, I finally got the justice I deserved. Neil and I continued to be friends, and I knew from then on that I could count on him. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Stay stunned.